What is going on, guys? Blink here, back with a new guide. In this guide, I'll be showing you guys how you can improve utilizing the sniper. We'll basically get into everything you need to know in order to build your skills to that next level. This month's V-Bucks giveaway winner will be announced on my Twitter at the end of this month, so make sure you guys follow me on Twitter. Next month's V-Bucks giveaway will also be going on once May 1st hits, so make sure you guys visit the link in the description, enter. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, as I post an Amazon gift card code in the comments every time I upload. By turning on notifications, you'll have a way better chance of getting here first and redeeming that code. Anyways, guys, let's get to this guide. Now, the majority of your sniper eliminations will most likely come from targets that aren't moving, and targets that aren't moving are much easier to kill than moving ones. So let's get into non-moving targets. All our focus is now geared towards the vertical movement of our reticle positioning on a non-moving target. When sniping a very close target, you don't have to consider any sort of bullet drop, which is good. So now you're going to need to adjust your crosshair onto your target's head. You always want to go for the head when shooting targets, as the body shot won't eliminate them, which results in you fighting it out as your opponent potentially gets his heal off, which means you technically never hit him. So our focus will be towards that head at all times. Now, you can see I've aimed in and my crosshair isn't on my target, which will happen pretty often since you don't have a crosshair on your screen until you've scoped in with the sniper. Don't think this is an issue you're having, as it's a normal thing that happens. Now, if you're really off your target, then you have to practice guesstimating much better. So after scoping in, I have to readjust the crosshair. Do this quickly, and once the readjustment is done, there will be a split second you stop your crosshair before you shoot. That way you don't overshoot your target. When you're pretty new to sniping, you'll notice yourself doing it much slower. It might seem like I'm not stopping my crosshair at all, and that's because I've repeated this movement so many times, which makes it very easy for me to predict my shot. So how can you repeat this movement without interruptions? Well, once you can find yourself a sniper, find any random object and choose one point you want to focus on. Scope in on the object and readjust your crosshair onto the point. Do this many times until you get really good at it. Change up the distances too. Now, when you're at a farther distance, I recommend you add a shot just to make sure you're actually hitting the target, especially if you got really fast at it. You might even be overshooting it slightly or undershooting it, and you won't even know it, as it's much harder to predict if you're on target at a farther distance. I also recommend you grab a semi-auto sniper when practicing, as you don't have to reload after every shot. Now, you won't always find a sniper, but I recommend you try going for unnamed areas on the map, as you'll usually find less people, and if you're able to find that sniper, you'll have much more time to practice without any interruptions. Now, one last thing, if you're having a hard time tracking the object, then your ADS sensitivity might not be great for you. If you notice yourself undershooting too much, you might need to up your sensitivity a little, and if you notice yourself overshooting it a little, then you might need to turn it down. Try turning it up and down, and you might be surprised how much easier you've made it for yourself. Now, what if your opponent's much farther away? Well, you're gonna have to readjust your crosshair vertically. The farther your opponent is, the higher you'll have to place your crosshair, since you'll have to take into account bullet drop when players are farther, as the bullet doesn't travel straight the whole way. Now, I have created a range finding guide a while back that'll help you guys estimate player distances and adjust your crosshair accordingly. I strongly recommend you guys check it out if you haven't yet. I'll link it down in the description below. Now, if you don't want to look into the guide, then the best way I can explain is if your opponent is around 100 meters, then place your crosshair slightly above his head. So basically, anytime he seems pretty far, just put it slightly over his head and shoot. If you don't get the headshot, you'll usually get the body shot on him. This target was 148 meters, so I placed my crosshair slightly above his head. If he was 100 meters, same thing, slightly above his head. You'll get really good at estimating how much more higher or lower you need to readjust your crosshair the more you practice. It'll end up being automatic for you. So let's take it back to the training area. The best way to practice bullet drop is to target any point on an object and try aiming for it as you get farther and farther. You'll have to guess the distance you are from that object and slightly raise your crosshair the more you back up. I also recommend you don't unscope after shooting. That way you can watch the bullet travel the whole way, as there aren't any bullet impact indicators in Fortnite, so you won't be able to tell if you hit or missed. So let's talk a little bit about smart positioning. Now, you guys can see I'm using the right wall for cover as I spot my opponents. You always want to use the closest wall that's in front of your opponent for cover, which was the right wall. And you might be thinking, the wall in front of my stairs is the closest, and it might be, but I can't cover myself with it as I have my stairs in front, so I need to utilize the right wall. Now, as you scope in, you want to slowly peek out at the same time. The key here is to have your crosshair ready faster than you peek out. Now, this target seems kind of far, so what do? I place my crosshair slightly over his head. If you've done it right, your crosshair should be on the target and you should still be slightly moving forward before taking the shot. Now, that's if you get to a point where you're really good with peeking. At first, you'll be slower at adjusting your crosshair, but as I've already said, it's not going to become instantly easy. It'll take some time, and you'll probably take a little longer to adjust the positioning if you're new. Another thing you want to take into account is that you only want to peek out slightly. That way you're exposing less of your character model. There's also one more important thing you should be doing, is adding a crouch after shooting. If you've mastered the sniping but you keep getting hit after backing up, then you might be peeking out too far. Crouch first, then back up. Alright, let's talk about pre-lining up your crosshair before your opponent peeks. So if you know there's an opponent inside a fort, you can also pre-line up your crosshair before he even peeks out. Now, you should only be utilizing this peeking method is if it's the last opponent, or if you know there's no opponents around, and well, you can't really figure that part out. So if you utilize this method, then make sure you're not holding the angle for too long. Now, if you're holding the angle long or short, then make sure you're slightly moving left and right. That way it makes it harder for anyone to line up a shot on you, including your opponent. The moment your opponent peeks out, stop the movement and shoot. If you shoot while moving, it will throw your accuracy off. So make sure you stop before shooting anytime you shoot a sniper, no matter what the situation is. So how do you predict the pre-lineup? Now, if he's peeked out before, then pre-line up the same corner he's been peeking out. If he's never peeked out, then it all depends on the positioning of you and your opponent. Most of the time, you and your opponent will choose the closest corner from each other to peek from, because you expose less of your body and it's an easier peeking angle to readjust your crosshair. So if you suspect a player inside a fort, then line up your crosshair to the closest corner of his fort. So we've gotten into non-moving opponents. Now, what if your opponent's moving? Well, now you'll have to lead your crosshair, which takes more time to learn but will drastically improve your sniping game. If your target is close or even at a medium distance, then there's more sudden mouse movements you need to make. The main thing you need to make sure is that your crosshair is in front of your target. Once you can keep your crosshair in front of your target, then take the shot. It will always hit because of the close distance. If he's even close, like in this example, I could have had my crosshair right on him and I still would have hit the shot. Now, let me explain to you guys the method I utilize to help me lead shots more consistently. All the things I've talked about in this guide will work just as well in console. Moving your mouse is your right analog stick and shooting is just your right trigger. Everything will work the same. So take in any information you can from this guide and practice it. So if my crosshair ends up being behind my opponent, I readjust it directly onto my opponent and I quickly add a slight flick as I shoot. So basically I left click my mouse right when I add a slight sudden movement to my right because my opponent was moving to my right. I utilize this lead shot method in situations where my opponent might be unpredictable or stops moving. He's also getting ready for a shot just like I am, and he can stop moving at any moment. I don't want to lead in front of him because if he stops moving, I'll have to flick to him and shoot. Or if he makes a sudden movement to my left, I have to make a more aggressive flick, which is harder to do and it doesn't guarantee a hit. Now, by me keeping my crosshair on him, I can confirm he's still moving to my right and I add that slight flick as I shoot. If he stops moving, I can stop moving my crosshair and take the shot. Just a nice method to help you guys get better at lead shooting. Now, if it's harder for me to track my opponent, then what you want to do is match the speed of your opponent as soon as you can. And once you feel like it's matched, you add that flick shot. Doesn't matter if you're matching the speed in front of your opponent or behind your opponent. The closer you keep your crosshair by your opponent, the less flicking momentum you have to add. Now, what if your target makes sudden movements to the left, then right, and so on? Well, it's going to be a harder shot to hit, and you'll only have milliseconds to match the speed of your opponent when going for that flick shot, especially if your opponent is barely peeking like in this example, or making sudden directional movements. Overall, leading opponents isn't an easy thing to do, and it requires a lot of practice. So, take in the methods I've explained and practice utilizing them on your own opponents. The practice methods at the beginning of the guide will help you guys lead your targets better, but one more thing you can do is try tracing random objects with your crosshair while keeping the speed consistent. This will help you match the speed of your target when getting ready for that flick. The next thing I want to talk about is patience, and patience will get you kills, and it can also get you killed if you're too patient. Now, sometimes you won't have to lead a shot if you can predict your opponent's next move. If he's on a roof moving around, he's probably going to stop for a second to analyze his surroundings. By being patient and waiting until he stops, you can usually get an easy shot on him. This is the same thing with players running near trees. If an opponent has a pickaxe out, he might be trying to gather some wood, which might grant you an easier shot to take. Now, you don't want to stay scoped in for long periods of time, as you might be getting targeted too and you don't even know it. Only use this predicting method if you suspect your opponent will stop moving in the next few seconds. You also usually don't want to build yourself into a fort because you might lose a chance to get an easy shot. Overall, be careful when utilizing this method, and you might notice me jumping right after the shot. I do this no matter what because I don't have cover around me. After taking a shot, another player might be lining me up too, and if I add a jump, he might miss or maybe hit my torso or legs. I do this with opponents that I spot all of a sudden, and I have a chance for a quick shot at them. I'll take my shot and jump to avoid taking any damage back. Now, everything I've talked about applies to the hunting rifle too. The only difference is not having a close zoom like the sniper. Basically, the hunting rifle is better in close range situations compared to a bolt or a semi, because you don't have to make drastic flicking motions. Now, there is one extra method that you can do only with the hunting rifle, which is pre-lining up your shot even before peeking out. To do this method, make sure you're crouched and get close to the edge of your fort without exposing yourself. Line up your crosshair right under your opponent, stand up, and shoot. This allows you to shoot right away without having much of a delay, since you don't have to readjust your crosshair as it's already lined up when you stand up. Now, one last situation comparing the hunting rifle and the bolt. So, this opponent was on top of a mountain, and I lined up my crosshair above his head. It's a little harder to see, but it's the same procedure. Ended up getting a hit marker as I finished off my opponent that I was currently fighting. Grabbed his bolt, and I did the same thing. Lined up my crosshair above his head since he was far, and I got the kill. So guys, I'm hoping this guide can help out. I've explained everything I possibly can to help you improve your sniping. All you now have to do is take in the information and apply it into your gameplay. Remember to practice these methods I've shown and try to become more consistent every day. And a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated as it does help me out a lot. Anyways guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and I'll see you on the next one.